All right, good morning, everyone. Event Trader coming on here. We are going to welcome in Carmine Atteo. Carmine, you there?
Yeah, good morning, Gavin. How was your weekend?
I'm doing good. Give me a quick second, Carmine. I'm just going to cover this New York Fed piece
Yeah.
that's hitting right now. Expected inflation unchanged at 3% in December. 3 year ahead expected inflation rises to 3% versus 2.6% in November. 5 year, that actually declines to 2.7% in December from 2.9% in November. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic there. December year ahead expected food prices increased. December year ahead expected gas prices are down and the lowest since September 2022. So we'll get into that with Carmine here in a second on some of the policies that could be impacting that. And expected future income and earnings declined in December. Household view on personal financial situation improved in December. And then the last thing from the New York Fed, chance of missing debt payments in December matches September 2024 and April 2020 levels. So some elevated numbers there. Let's see how that impacts the markets. I would think that this would be a drag on everything right here. So let's see if they're able to hold it up in the face of this number. So, Carmine, how's your weekend, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. Had a good weekend or day at the table, so it was pretty good. How about yourself?
It was good. It was good. Just up in Raleigh visiting with some cousins and stuff. So nice time up there. It was funny seeing the South's ineptitude around snow on full display, Carmine, because they got a spattering of snow in Raleigh, and they were shutting schools. The donut shop was closed because of cold weather. I mean, the
Oh,
Irish dancing
yeah.
was canceled. Oh my goodness! You would have thought that the California wildfires were raging going on down there with the way people were acting to the snow. So that was entertaining coming from the
Yeah,
Northeast in Chicago, of course.
I had the same experience. I was living in Dallas for a few months, as you know, and they had the snow coming. They had all these press conferences, and they're like, the mayor's there, the governor's there, we're preparing for this 3 inches of snow. And I'm like, man, this is nothing compared to what we get.
Yeah, it was funny to see that on full display. Let me ask the subs a quick question here. Carmine, I'm hearing from a few folks that you're a good bit quieter than myself. I don't know, maybe I'm just talking too loud. But maybe jump up your volume a little bit. But
All
curious
right.
if anybody else is having the same issue with Carmine's volume. All right.
How about now? Is that better?
Yeah, it seems like most people are okay. So um, just we'll keep going with this, and should be fine, I'm sure. All right, Carmine, let's break into the latest. Obviously, pretty big week ahead, so we're going to get into that in a little bit. But a few things from last week that we're watching here. One, that TikTok ban. I know that there was a lot of questions from folks about that. Obviously, around Snap and Meta platforms playing in a factor. But what went on with that, and where do we kind of stand moving forward on that TikTok ban?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court heard the case basically from TikTok's lawyers arguing that this law is unconstitutional. They're arguing that it violates the First Amendment to free speech. It looked like, based on what the Supreme Court justices have asked and how they're kind of reading the tea leaves, so to speak, is that it looks like the Supreme Court's going to uphold the ban on TikTok, which to me is not really that much of a surprise. The Supreme Court typically does not like to revoke laws that pass through Congress, right? They very much often will revoke like an executive order and say like this is unconstitutional, but it has to be really egregious to revoke a law that was passed through Congress for them. So that's kind of the way you kind of got to look at it here. If they do leave the final ruling in place, this is what's going to happen. So on January 19th, which is the day before the inauguration, the TikTok will be banned in the U.S. unless it comes up with a buyer in the next 6 days, which is very unlikely.
So
So
what does that entail? Because I know I had my 12-year-old cousin asking me, and I told her I wasn't quite sure. But does that just mean that it just gets completely cut off? Nobody could use it?
yeah, basically, so Apple and Google will take the app out of the app stores. So new people wouldn't be able to download it. But also, if you log on to TikTok, supposedly, you'll get a big error message saying, this is not being allowed to use in the U.S. per this law, and you won't be able to log in anymore. Now, those smart 12-year-old kids will be able to get around that if they use a VPN and say, "Hey, I'm in the UK or Africa or something," and then they'll be able to get in. But that's neither here nor there. The bottom line is that it's going to be banned in the U.S. on the January 19th before Trump takes office if the Supreme Court upholds this. Um, so basically, this is the next steps after that if that were to happen. The law empowers Trump or any president to pause the ban for 90 days. Trump could also declare TikTok in compliance with the law and basically say, hey, you guys are complying. We're going to put it back up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens once Trump takes office. There's several options he could do to kind of keep it active, so to speak. And we'll just have to wait to see what he does. This is obviously a 180 from when he was president. The first time he was pushing the ban TikTok, but now he likes TikTok and he says he wants to keep TikTok alive in the U.S. So this is there's several options we could do. I haven't seen any reporting about which one he's going to take yet, but I wouldn't be surprised within the first week of the new administration that he does like one of those two things, like he either pauses for 90 days or he declares TikTok in compliance with the law, and then TikTok will be allowed to come back. So. Yeah, so that's kind of basically where we stand here, and I would expect the Supreme Court official ruling probably sometime this week.
Okay. Taking a look at this from a psychological perspective, Carmine, I would think that some folks would look at Trump's decisions on TikTok to maybe be a little bit of a read through on his approach for tariffs. Would you agree with that, or do you think that that could be misplaced and these are two completely different matters in terms of dealing with China?
Yeah, so I think I think it could be a kind of a negotiating tool, so to speak. So I think this could be one of those things where he uses as say, hey, China, I gave you this. Your app is working. You got to buy some more product. You got to avoid these tariffs or whatever. And just one more negotiating tool he has in his toolbox in order to get what he wants out of China, which is more buying more farm product, buying more LNG or whatever he wants them to buy as part of these trade agreements. So I think it's just one more tool in the toolbox. As far as the tariffs are concerned, I've always thought that once he gets in, he's probably going to do some executive orders on tariffs, but they're not going to be a 20% across the board tariff. I said like a couple weeks ago that Washington Post report that he ended up denying is probably going to be what the administration does. It's going to be more targeted at specific industries, and it's going to be much more methodical than just a flat 20% a tariff across every country. I don't think you'll see that, and I don't think you'll see the tariffs against Canada and Mexico or the EU yet. Well, maybe the EU, but not Canada or Mexico because of the North American trade agreement there. So I think that you'll definitely will see them on China, but I think they'll be a little bit more methodical than across the board on every product. So we'll have to wait for that. I would expect that probably within the first 100 days of his administration. That once his USTR gets confirmed by Congress, once his Commerce chief gets confirmed by Congress, then all those folks will be in place, ready to kind of hash out what they want to do on tariffs.
Yeah, so I mean, just all that, it seems like the no-brainer is that Trump will pause this for 90 days just to kind of keep it around and keep that as a negotiating tool then, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's my guess. I haven't seen any reporting though about what he's going to do, but I'm very surprised if he lets it be because I think he's gonna try to pause this and say, "Hey, 90 days, China, this is gonna go away unless you do this or that," and I wouldn't be surprised if he takes that line. So
All right. Um, let's see, we'll get a little bit deeper into some of the tariffs here in a second, but let's move on, Carmine, with the Trump transition. Next week is his inauguration speech. Is, is it always the third Monday? Because I guess it runs on for Martin Luther King Day frequently, then, no? Like
Well,
once every 7 years, I
it's always
guess.
it's always the 20th, so it's going to be Martin Luther King Day once every 7 years, unless it's one of those leap years where Monday gets skipped, and you might not see it for another 14 years. So, but yeah, but this particular time it's always January 20th, but it could be sometimes January 20th on the weekend, and they have to be on the weekend. So, it's whatever day is the 20th, that's when they'll do the inauguration.
Okay. All right. Any notable pieces around the inauguration? Obviously, I would expect to it to be a long one. Trump
Well,
doesn't seem to be able to do less than an hour and a half, I feel. But any notable appearances? China, obviously. What kind of envoy are they going to be sending? Things like that.
yeah, so I honestly would expect it to be less. I would put the over under at 45 minutes. His last one was right around there, but he could definitely go a little longer. I wouldn't be surprised about that, but I would say um, right around there. But one of the more interesting things is I think will be big for the markets is how his tone's going to be. Is he going to come out raging and raving about I'm going to put tariffs here, I'm going to put tariffs there, all these other countries are horrible, and or is he going to be more unifying and say, hey, I want to solve the problems of the country, and I want to work together with the other side, and we'll see what kind of tone he brings. I think that's going to be a big uh, aspect for the speech about how the markets react when we open up Tuesday morning. So we'll see. He told Meet the Press that it's going to be more unifying, but he said the same thing about his RNC speech, and that wasn't really that unifying. The first 20 minutes were, but other than that, he kind of went into rally mode. So that we'll see how that works out. China's going to send a high-level envoys to his inauguration. President Xi is not going to come, but there are some heads of state that are coming. You have um, Maloney of Italy coming. You have the president of Argentina coming, Melli. You have Hungary's leader coming. So you have a few leaders in Europe, a couple in South America that are coming. And that's the first time heads of state have ever come to one of our inaugurations. If you look, the State Department looked this up, and it's first time any of these folks have ever come. So those folks will be, in the crowd somewhere. I'm sure they'll get, pretty good seats. And yeah, I think the big thing is going to be the tone and how he sets for his first 100 days.
All right. Moving along then, Carmine, California wildfires. What's going on with that in terms of funding? Obviously seen a lot of banter between Newsom and Trump in the press. Anything that we need to know about those?
Yeah, so I would definitely keep the insurance companies on the radar here on this because obviously, if the government provides all the funding for the rebuilding of all these structures that got horribly destroyed in these fires, it's just horrible. Our hearts really go out to everybody down there. I can't imagine what they're going through. But for market perspective, for the insurance companies, if the government does indeed cover all the costs of the rebuilding effort, then I think the insurance companies will be rally back. But if there's fights over the funding under Trump's administration, saying I wouldn't be surprised if he says, "Hey, I'm going to give you the funding, but you guys have to do manage your forests better. You have to manage your water pressure better and stuff like that." I wouldn't be surprised if that's the line that Trump takes with Newsom here. So yeah, but I think in the end the California wildfires will get funded, but I think there's going to be a couple strings attached to it. But we'll see how that works out.
Well, that's one thing that I kind of find interesting because I keep seeing these headlines about Biden sending emergency aid to the Ukraine, and we've talked in the past about them emptying the coffers in front of Trump so that they could get that out there. Is that not something that they can do with the California wildfires?
Well, so that was already approved through Congress. So they're just basically. So there was a bill that was passed a few months ago I forget what it was, but I think it was around 60 billion or so for Ukraine, and then they're just basically emptying that out ahead of Trump's administration because they're afraid that Trump wouldn't give them anything. So they're basically emptying that out ahead of time. But yeah, it was a law that was passed. They can do this with California if they have money left in FEMA. Remember, the Congress passed $100 billion in disaster relief a few weeks ago when they passed the continuing resolution. So if there's
Yeah.
anything left out of that, then Biden, yeah, Biden can say, hey, I'm going to send this to California, or even Trump could say, hey, I'm going to send this to California. But it just depends if there's anything left in the coffers once that Congress already approved or not. And I would expect there would be, but I think that Trump might say, okay, you guys got to manage your forests better. You guys got to have a better plan for water pressure and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the kind of line he takes with the folks out there in California.
Poor folks in Western North Carolina are going to get shunned by Paris Hilton and stuff, I'm sure.
Yep.
If there's a clamoring for FEMA
Oh yeah, oh
funds.
yeah, oh yeah. That's definitely going to be a narrative. I mean, if you see it already, I see. I follow people from both sides of the aisle. Far left to far right on Twitter, and I can already see a lot of the MAGA folks saying, "Hey, they're tweeting out pictures of the people in Western North Carolina sitting in tents, freezing cold, and they're saying, well, all the rich people in Malibu are going to get their houses paid for. So that's going to be a fight."
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to track, that's for sure. Okay, Middle East. Let's talk about some of the ceasefire talks going on between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, so this is I think was going to be was an underreported story. I think it's a really big story actually for the next week. So President-elect Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff he arrived in Israel to push for a ceasefire deal to release the hostages. Trump said at his press conference last week there will be quote hell to pay in the Middle East if the hostages are not released by January 20th. So this really puts him in a box, right? One of two things are going to happen: either the hostages get released with a ceasefire deal, which I think is actually very possible, or that he gets into office and he's going to have to do some type of strike against Iran's nuclear facilities or their oil assets. So I think we really have to follow this to see which way it goes. My gut right now tells me that because Biden's actually working on the ceasefire too, so they're probably coordinating with each other. So my gut tells me that before January 20th, that we'll see the hostages get released and a ceasefire agreed to by Hamas and Israel. But if not, then I think we'll have to definitely keep oil on the radar because I think that Trump will follow through what he's saying here is if those hostages are not released. So we'll see what happens with this. But Biden's going to give a foreign policy address at 2 p.m. Eastern time today, and we'll see if there's anything new that he adds from the negotiations. Going on because both sides have said, not really a side, but Trump's people and Biden's people have both said they're getting close. So when this happens, if it happens before the 20th, there'll be a lot of people taking credit for this. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Everyone's going to want to attach their name to that piece of cord, right?
yeah, exactly. So Trump's going to say he wouldn't have done it without me saying there's going to be hell to pay, and Biden's going to say no, it was all me. You didn't do
Yeah.
anything. So we'll be able to see the back and forth between them.
Politicize everything. Tis the American way, it seems, unfortunately.
Yeah,
All right.
it sounds
Uh,
good. So, but yeah, keep an eye on oil there if those hostages are not released
yeah.
by inauguration.
While we're on oil, any thoughts on the Russian sanctions?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a positive for oil. We'll see if Trump keeps these on or not. Of course, he wants the war to end, but this is getting more pressure on Russia maybe to come to the table, so it might actually benefit his talks to get that war to end. So we'll watch and see if his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent keeps those tariffs on or not the tariffs. I'm sorry, the sanctions on Russia on or not, and that's going to be, I think, the key. And if they come off, I think you'll see a drop back in oil prices.
Okay. Just keeping an eye on markets. 10 years inching close for just that 4.8% level. Uh, Equity markets, they've been rolling over since Carmine came on. So we'll just blame Carmine instead of the New York Fed for the rollover here. Carmine Fetterman, he popped down to Mar-a-Lago, right?
Yeah,
What's going on? What's the optics there? Any thoughts on Fetterman perhaps becoming an important player on brokering deals?
Yeah, so it was interesting because Fetterman went down for a meeting with Trump and Mar-a-Lago over the weekend. Trump just made a comment on social media about the meeting. He said it was Fetterman is a quote very fascinating person, and his wife is lovely, and he couldn't be more impressed with his meeting. He said he's a common sense person. He's not liberal or conservative, which is what we need. So. That's what he said. So, one of the interesting things is that the pushback that Trump's getting from Congress, right, is particularly in the House, is coming from more from his right, not from the moderates, right? The moderates don't really seem to be complaining about much. It's just the people that are complaining are the kind of the further right people that want uh, all these strings attached to the tax bill and so forth. So, it's possible. I mean, I don't think it's likely, but it's possible that Trump could say, "Hey, I'm going to leave you guys alone, and I'm going to work with Fetterman, and if he says he can get like 8 or 9 Democrats along with him on these legislation and make it bipartisan, that's a path that Trump can choose if these folks continue to kind of get in his way. So the bill's going to be very different though if he chooses that path. It's going to be you're not going to get a lower corporate tax rate. You might get or you're not going to get a 15% corporate tax rate. You're probably going to keep that extended at 21. You're going to keep you probably want a little higher tax on the highest earners and so forth. But that's a deal that he could make if he wants it. My gut tells me he won't, but that's possible. And the more meetings like this, we'll see. Uh, the the more likely that is. But again, it's just right now. I think the more likely scenario is that he tries to get all the rest of the Republicans on board to pass that large continuing reconciliation bill, which we'll talk about a little later.
All right, let's bring it in Congress then here, Carmine. What's going on with the reconciliation bill?
Yeah, so according House Speaker Mike Johnson said he favors one large reconciliation package, which includes energy, immigration tax cuts, spending cuts, debt ceiling increase, and tariffs will not be in the bill. But they said Trump can impose the tariffs via executive order on his own. This is the first step of the process will be to pass a shell of the reconciliation bill in February, and then the committees will begin work on the bill in March, and then the House hopes to pass the bill by late April. Again, I think that's a little optimistic, but they hope to pass the bill by late April. I think it's probably going to be the summertime. To tell you the truth, because there's a lot of disagreement, and once the bill comes out, there's going to be a lot of people, um, clamoring to get their objectives put in there. So I think by the summer, right now I do think it's going to pass. But it's going to be pretty close as far as the House is concerned. Once it gets out of the House, I think it's pretty smooth sailing, to tell you the truth, because the Senate's basically saying, John Thune's basically saying, hey, whatever the House sends us, we'll take care of here, whether it's one bill or two. So they seem to be, on board with the agenda. It's just the 20 or 30 folks in the House that seem to be, holding things up. So that's kind of the situation we'll have to deal with there. But as far as what the 20 or 30 folks want, though, is they want spending cuts, right? So that's the other piece of this. So Republicans are considering $5 trillion in spending cuts to fund the agenda, basically, and they're basically considering eliminating the climate change spending under the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and they're proposing changes to Medicare and Medicaid and the welfare programs. Basically, so if I put a link here to this Politico um, chart here that kind of shows what spending cuts they're proposing. You can see that a big part of it is going to be work requirements for Medicaid. That'll bring in supposedly 918 billion, or I'm sorry, 2.3 trillion dollars. So if they, I mean, these are pretty significant cuts, yeah, spending cuts. So if they can get, these passed, I mean, that's going to be a big change to kind of how things operate here, because you'll have lower taxes, you'll have a large amount of government spending reduced through Medicaid and Medicare, and work requirements and welfare and so forth. And there's definitely going to be some pushback on a lot of this stuff. So we'll see how that works out. Um, that's a big amount that they can try to offset the tax cuts by. 5 trillion. So some of the estimates were up to 9 trillion before, but that was with the other stuff like the no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, which doesn't look like they're going to be able to do. So they're probably going to do the no tax on tips, but that was the only one of the three that they'll be able to get. So we'll have to see what the CBO says once the legislation is written, whether or not it'll add the deficit. Because let's say, for hypothetically speaking, that they have the lower taxes, and they have all these spending cuts, and it comes out to maybe far lower than what the markets were expecting before as far as increasing the deficit. I think that'll be positive for the bond markets and cause yields to, of course, go down. So we'll have to see how that CBO score, I think, is going to be pretty big deal once that comes out for this legislation. But I think that's at least a couple months away so far.
Okay, and for those interested, I just posted the link from the political article that Carmine was referencing there up at 11:25. So feel free to do a deeper dive into those numbers. Okay, Carmine, how about on the immigration front? Where do we stand there?
Yeah, so the House passed the Lincoln-Riley Act, which allows the president to deport undocumented immigrants that committed crimes. It passed the House with about 52 Democrats and all the Republicans voting in support of it. So it was bipartisan, and I expected to pass the Senate with over 60 votes. And what will then happen? They're going to vote either today or I'm sorry, they're probably going to vote tomorrow. Actually, they're not there today, but tomorrow. And then once they pass it tomorrow, what they'll do is they'll hold it for Trump until he gets in. So this will be one of the first things he signs once he gets into office.
All right. Let's see, Carmine. Then there's one thing I wanted to.
Scott Bissett is
Yeah, no, no, I got you. There's one other thing. Oh, what do you think Trump will do around anti-dumping for steel, aluminum, metals?
Yeah, I think he's gonna. My guess right now, I haven't seen any reporting on this, but my guess right now is he's gonna ratchet up the regulations against China. The steel industry is very near and dear to his heart. In Pennsylvania, so for sure. So I would expect that he's gonna try to put pressure on China and any other country that's dumping steel, because I think that's part of part of the reasons why he won the election.
All right, Carmine, and then finally this week should be pretty interesting. Number of hearings. Obviously, Bissent's the big one for the markets. Hegseth's the one that you're going to want to get your popcorn ready for. Let's concentrate on Bissent, but then I'll also talk about some of the
Yeah,
other ones.
absolutely. Yep.
And I guess the thing for me is, how do you see this as a read through for Trump getting fiscal policies across?
Yeah, so I think it'll be pretty interesting to see how he kind of answers a lot of these questions, because uh, he's going to be asked a lot about the deficit, right? And he's going to say, okay, you want to pass all these tax cuts, but this is going to add to the deficit. How are you? And what's your position on the debt ceiling? He's going to be asked too. Do you think that should be abolished, and so forth? So I think there's going to be a very juicy hearing with a lot of information from Scott Bissett. So I definitely would tune in on Thursday. I think this is going to be a big event for the market on Thursday at 10:30 Eastern time. So there's going to be several. I think the Republicans would basically he's going to get confirmed with large bipartisan majorities, but. That's really not a question, but I think the issue for the markets is going to be how he conducts himself and how he answers all these questions surrounding the deficit, taxes, spending cuts, and all this stuff that Trump wants to get done. So I think we'll see a lot of insight into how they want to approach the agenda. I think it's going to be a very interesting hearing.
Are there any quote unquote gotcha questions that Bissent's probably going to be getting here?
Well, yeah, the only one I can think of is really on the debt ceiling. If he's obviously going to keep with what his boss wants, right? His boss wants to get rid of the debt ceiling, or at the very least just to spend it until he's done in office. So I think that's going to be. He might get pushback from some of the fiscal hawks on the committee there, on that from the Republican side. I think the Democrats will be all for it. Like Elizabeth Warren will be patting him on the back for that. But some of the fiscal hawks on the Republican side might push back against him, and I think we'll see how he kind of responds with that.
Okay, and then Final question, just throw the tinfoil hat on real quick, Carmine. A lot of concerns that Biden might try to push through some proposals this week and before January 20th, when Trump takes office. Is there anything that we should be on the lookout for this week that could upend markets?
I don't. I haven't heard anything that would definitely upend the market. But there's a lot of talk about pardons, right? And that's something that won't impact the market. But I think you'll definitely see some pardons on the weekend before he leaves, on various people on preemptive pardons, so to speak, against some of the folks that he's afraid that Trump might go after. I think that'll be a good thing for Trump, to be honest with you, because I think it'll be very unpopular if he does go after those folks. It'll be very similar to what how the backlash that happened against him when people went, like the New York cases specifically. So I think you'll see that, but I don't think it'll impact the market. But going back to the nomination hearings just for a second, as you said, it's going to be there's going to be a couple that are probably going to be pretty good television for the political folks. There's going to be Pete Hegseth, of course, is going to be Tuesday at 9:30 for Secretary of Defense. There's going to be and RFK. I don't see he's on the list yet, or this week, so he'll probably be in the following week. But the other one, of course, is going to be Pam Bondi. She's going to be her hearing is going to be Wednesday at 9:30. So those two will probably get a lot of attention from the press, and I right now I think the vast majority of Trump's nominees will be confirmed with bipartisan majorities. But folks like Pete Hegseth, folks like um, Tulsi Gabbard, those are the folks that are probably just party line votes, and with a couple of Republicans voting against them, they'll probably just squeak by. But right now, I think everybody gets confirmed, and most with bipartisan support.
All right, Carmine. Anything else before we let you get going here?
That's pretty much it.
All right. Well, I know you got some busy weeks coming up here with earnings, so appreciate you taking the time and coming on with us and giving us the latest update on the geopolitics. And uh, look forward to hearing more from you. I guess we're off next week, so the next time we'll be meeting will be the 27th.
Well, we can do a show of Tuesday the 21st if you like, right after the inauguration day.
Okay, fair enough. That's what we will do then.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin. Have a good one.
All right, you too, Carmine. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.